All right. Good morning, Doug. Lots of interesting news today. One of the things that jumps out, of course, is the Kabuki Theater, as you called it, of the debt ceiling. What are your thoughts on the increase of that?
Well, it seems rather indeterminate what these people are doing. I mean, are they? Look, they're not going to stop the spending, as I think we talked about before, because it is, as they say, baked into the system. Every GS, whatever the numbers are, 10, 13, whoever these people are that run departments or subsectors of departments, have a vested interest in having more employees and bigger budgets. It makes them more important. It makes it easier for them to take the next leap upwards to their Peter Principle level of incompetence, where they get promoted to an area where they clearly can't go any higher and they're incompetent at what they're doing. But bigger is better from all these people point of view. So the government is wired to get bigger and to spend more money. But the Republicans, since they don't currently run the government, resist it. But when they're in office, they'll be pushing their own programs with their own people. So now this is completely out of control, and it's hopeless. And I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, because they don't know what the numbers are, quite frankly. I mean, they come up with numbers that seem like they're very exact, but they really don't know how much they're spending. And of course, there are contingent liabilities, which don't show up there, which can be absolutely gigantic, which are still out there. And things like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which grow on their own. So all this stuff, all we really know is that the government is frittering away about $2 trillion per year, more than it takes in. And that's going to go up, because when the economy finally collapses, and yes, I think it will, spectacularly at some point, those numbers are going to go to $3 and $4 and $5 trillion per year. So I don't know. It amazes me that these people can put on such a dog and pony show and people take them seriously.
They do. And I mean, one of the things that stood out to me this time, is this debt ceiling debate, every few years, it seems like it happens. And at the last minute, they secure a deal, which supposedly, so there's some horse trading that happens. And then, they move forward, agreeing to spend more, to agree to go into more debt. But this time they didn't raise the debt ceiling like they usually do. They usually pick a number, and say, okay, well, we're going to increase it by 5 trillion or whatever. They just suspended it altogether. So basically for the next 2 years, there is no ceiling.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. The Democrats are in back at the moment of more spending. But, I've got to say that you have these two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. And I actually respect the Democrats more. That's shocking to say, I know, because they're despicable. I mean, they're disreputable. They're horrible people. But at least the Democrats have a core philosophy, and they try to do what they say. The Republicans don't have any core philosophy except, hey, slow down, you guys. You're going too far, too fast. And so, of course, everybody looks at them as being hypocrites and not worth the powder it takes to blow them to hell. They're both horrible, though. And yeah, it's true. They're both just two wings of the same deep state party.
Yeah, and it's just as proof of this, that the Democrats are at least more, I don't know, honest or whatever. They're certainly more effective. You forwarded to me this article about the Minnesota legislature and all the laws that they passed during this last session. And I mean, these people get stuff done. You can't argue that.
No, they're completely out of control. Let's look at some of those things because they're absolutely shocking that a state legislature would be so incredible. Okay,
Yeah.
fundamental right to abortion. You know, I can't get very involved in this whole abortion thing, quite frankly. I mean, my own view is, hey, look, this is between a woman and her doctor. So it's none of my business or the state's business. And I don't know if that makes me a Republican or a Democrat in the way I view it. But anyway.
It's the calling it a fundamental right thing that's interesting, though. You know, we're always adding new rights, it seems.
You're right. And of course, nobody's got a fundamental right to anything except to be left alone. So you're quite correct. That's a very good catch. You don't have a fundamental right to anything except to be left alone. That's it. But that's the one right that's always violated most consistently. Okay. Then you have then Minnesota is a refuge for children seeking sex changes. Well, that's just great.
They're trying to get away from their parents, you know, if they want to make their own decision, they don't want to be.
Yeah, if they've been unduly influenced or who the hell knows what it is, and they're going to screw up the rest of their lives. Well, it's a partial solution to the so-called overpopulation problem because most of these kids, they get involved in sex changes and things of that nature. Turn out they wind up committing suicide at some point in their lives. Is that tragic, as they say? Well, I don't know. That's another word that's misused. Tragedy is something where somebody who is great and has virtues gets on the slippery slope and goes to hell. That's a tragedy. But stupid mistakes on the part of average people, is that tragedy? I think the word has become degraded like so many.
Yeah, it reminds me of a hero in a way, right? It's related to that. We use hero, throw it around all the time.
Everybody's a hero. That's right. Just for existing, they're a hero. Exactly. I mean, of course, things are screwed up when people don't even know what they're talking about because they don't even understand the words they're using. What else do we have here? A lot of abortion stuff. Resource centers of state funding. Sure, got a problem, the government will pay for it.
Well, the government spending in general increased by 40%.
It's amazing. Well, the taxpayers don't care. They got lots of money in Minnesota, I guess. Extended medical assistance to include abortion. Legalized recreational marijuana use. Okay, fine. Everything should be legal, in my opinion, basically. Pre-registration for 16 to 17-year-olds. What does that mean?
Getting them to vote. It's for voting. So they're basically, they get on the rolls for it. Yeah.
Yes, of course. And this is another trend that's going on before our very eyes. My thought is that there should be people, first of all, I don't believe in voting. I don't believe in the government. Okay. But if you're going to have voting, perhaps people should vote only when they're 25. When it's said, and I think there's a lot of truth to it, actually, when your brain is more or less fully formed and you're truly rational. Certainly, it should be at least 21, so-called legal majority, but now it's 18. And in some countries, like in Argentina, for instance, they're trying to reduce it to 16 because, well, why not say 12, the age of puberty? Maybe that's reasonable to vote too.
Yeah, I think people think it's equitable or whatever term they might use for it to include young people, but usually the youth is used as a tool of manipulation. I mean, think of Mao's Little Red Guard. It wouldn't be possible to have the Cultural Revolution if you didn't enlist the kids.
Yeah, the way to solve this problem is to say you have to be a property owner, some reasonable amount of property. And then you're a member of the community, you're a worthwhile, productive citizen. Okay, then you can vote. But problem is the things that people vote for, and then the politicians they elect, what they do in their office. So anyway,
It's a lost
another,
cause.
yeah, another stupidity just before our very eyes. Bill to provide driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. Well, if they're illegal, why should they get a right to a driver's license?
Well, how about healthcare? Are you okay with healthcare? That is the next one for illegal immigrants.
Of course. And if you have a driver's license, that's actually de jure proof that you're a resident and a citizen. So yeah, that adds up, I guess. Healthcare to illegal immigrants. Come one, come all. We'll fix all your medical problems here in the most expensive medical system in the world. These things are actually patently insane, but they were passed, and now they're law in Minnesota. It's amazing.
Yeah, and this all this rewriting history or changing seems to be part of this woke agenda, and this I found interesting that they were wanting to design a new state flag, that's less offensive. I thought that was interesting. Why does that matter so much?
Yeah, Utah just did that, I think.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes, very conservative state. And I looked at the old flag, the new flag. I'm not sure. I'm not into flags to start with. So in a way, I don't give a damn. But whatever it is, it's going to be degraded. And I see you didn't put in yellow, restore the right to vote for violent felons who are on probation. I don't know. Why bother? I mean, if it's a violent felon on probation, why is it important they have the right to vote?
Well, I just think they probably think that they're a useful group. Obviously, they think it can help keep them in power.
Well, it's somebody else you can give $100 to as they make their way to the polls.
Exactly.
Yeah. Replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Yeah, Columbus has been pretty well besmirched. I mean, look, the guy had all kinds of personal flaws and problems. This is well known. Who doesn't, quite frankly? But they've turned him into an absolutely evil psychopath. And the indigenous peoples are now the righteous ones. Yes, I understand. Indigenous peoples had their lands taken from them, but this is the story of human history for about the last 500,000 years, when people actually became biologically modern. So nothing's changed. And Columbus has done a lot more good for the world than indigenous peoples did, who weren't doing anything, frankly. So I don't look. Why do we have a national holiday anyway? Columbus Day or
exactly.
People's Day? I mean, why do we all have to march in lockstep towards whatever politically explosive idea is being propagated?
It's a good point. But I think the objection to changing things is that conservatives would have certainly is that it's trying to erase history. And with Columbus, they besmirched him, but now they're trying to eliminate the knowledge of him. You know what I mean? You change the holiday so nobody ever goes, well, who is this Columbus Day or this Columbus guy that we have Columbus Day named after? I mean, you'll never even, in another generation, the name will be unknown. I think he'll just be gone to history.
That's right. He'll be down the memory hole. We'll be like
exactly
people that are photoshopped out of pictures.
Stalin's pictures. Exactly.
Yeah. So the next one's a good one. Declared Juneteenth a state holiday. That's rather amazing. I mean, Juneteenth is a total fraud. It's a scam. It's inaccurate. And they made it a state holiday. Wow. Okay. That's the one that says that U.S. history started with the arrival of the first slave. Do I have it right?
I think so. Yeah, and based in like Galveston, Texas, or something. I thought that's where it came out from originally. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the first slave. Where did the first slave arrive in the U.S.? The first black slave, I should say. because the Indians everybody had slavery back in the 17th century, everywhere. The Europeans, everybody. So anyway, but it's only
it's commemorating the end of slavery in the U.S. It says
the end of slavery. Well, that would be in 1866 or 6, or the Emancipation Proclamation, which, of course, when Lincoln put forth the Emancipation Proclamation, it was only freeing slaves in states that had seceded from the Union. So slavery still existed in the border states and in places in the North. So it was only making slavery illegal in the Deep South. That was the Emancipation Proclamation. But actually, it didn't go away until there was an amendment to the Constitution. I think, as you said, in 1866, probably.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Not only was it not relating to the Northern Territory, but it was only applied to the Southern states where Lincoln had no authority. So
yeah, exactly.
It was not real. It was just as real as the Juneteenth state holiday is.
Yeah, Juneteenth. Well, we'll see if that how that works out, whether the average person adopts it. But it's horrible. I mean, it shouldn't even be considered. And then raised the threshold for a political party to maintain major party status from 5% to 8%. Well, it's kind of further enshrining the two dominant parties. So
exactly,
it's to be expected. People that are in power want to make sure they stay in power. That's a good way to do it. Require Minnesota's electricity grid to be 100% carbon free by 2040. Well, in other words, no coal, no
natural gas, so it's going to be solar and wind.
That's what it means. Well, it could mean nuclear too, but nuclear is a dead duck currently. So, well, pass a law that the waves can't roll in on Lake Michigan too.
Exactly.
These people are actually crazy. Ban so-called conversion therapy. Now, isn't that where, if you have a kid who seems gay or perhaps joins some religion you don't like, you can institutionalize them and have shrinks work magic on him to change his mind?
You don't have to institutionalize them. It's just the act of treating a homosexuality, or I would assume all the LGBTQI plus blah blah blah, treating any of that as a psychological aberration that should be, worked through. I think that's the problem. You have to recognize it as an identity issue rather than as a psychological issue. Just like gender dysphoria used to be in the DSM, in the psychological handbook, it was labeled specifically a disorder. And now they removed that so that you can't treat it like that. You have to treat it as though, it's just totally authentic and not a mental issue at all.
Well, in point of fact, some of these things, part of the LG plus stuff, they actually are psychological aberrations, like somebody that wants to be a tranny and becomes a tranny. I mean, they've got something wrong with the way their brain is wired. But does that give anybody the right to forcibly do things to the person to change his mind? I'd say not. It's
definitely not. I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is a double-edged sword. Okay, it's good that conversion therapy is banned, but in a way, it kind of legitimizes the wholesomeness of these crazy aberrations. So they shouldn't be making laws about almost anything. Two great laws: do all that you say you're going to do, and don't aggress against other people's personal
property. But that goes back to the beginning of this. When looking at this stuff, is by defining more and more things as fundamental rights, then they can legitimize, these kind of this invasiveness by the state to protect rights, to make sure no one's aggressing on you.
Yeah. Well, Harvey Silverglate was so right when he wrote that book 20 years ago, 3 Felonies a Day, where he pointed out that the average American commits 3 felonies a day, whether he knows it or not. But I read an article recently that made the case that that's actually inaccurate. It's more like 5 felonies a day now because of lots of laws that are being passed that usually have consequences in the way of fines or even jail time if you violate things that are turned into laws. So carbon-free, that's not going to happen. Conversion therapy, 2 gun control bills, a red flag law, and universal background checks. Okay, well, more laws. Red flag laws.
The thing about the red flag law that really is just like if somebody, basically it's, that you can be adjudicated, your right, your fundamental right to this, to guns, to weapons can be denied you without any due process. I mean, that's one of the, so they, while they're creating new fundamental rights, they are pulling back on other fundamental rights, it seems to me.
Yes. And a red flag law is one where someone, perhaps an unidentified person, can report you for some real or imagined offense that involves a gun, and you're in a world of trouble.
Or just that you might be unstable and might hurt yourself or someone else. They don't have to say that that you have a gun, but you lose your right to have a gun when that's the case.
And this is actually a milder version of swatting somebody. It wasn't so terribly long ago that police departments didn't have SWAT teams, which are paramilitary in nature, that if you were accused of something, the cop or the sheriff would come to your door and knock on your door to find out what's going on. But when you're swatted, they send a SWAT team by to do God knows what to you. So this is like a milder version of swatting somebody, which is a great way to harass a neighbor that you don't like.
Exactly.
Actually, not such a great way to harass a neighbor you don't like. Anonymous calls to.
Well, one of the problems if you do that to your neighbor is that the SWAT teams get the address wrong, not ill frequently.
That's right.
That could show up at your door.
That's right. If you're going to SWAT somebody, make sure you don't SWAT the next door neighbor, but somebody on the other side of town, so that there's no direct blowback.
Exactly.
This is actually comical. These legislators in Minnesota must be actually bananas.
Well, and the other thing is that you think this red flag law right now, it could be an anonymous person, and you're not that person. You don't have the right to confront your accuser. An anonymous person can report you, and then while it's being adjudicated, you lose your right to the guns. But why wouldn't it be an algorithm that sees certain conduct online that warns about it and just says, just to be safe, we should make sure this person doesn't hurt themselves? Why wouldn't they outsource that to algorithms instead of require people to be involved?
Sure, of course. And if somebody says something that you don't like, it can be characterized, and many things are characterized as hate speech these days. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about hate speech and why that's actually, even if it's unsavory and unseemly, it can actually be a good thing in a lot of circumstances. But we've covered that in the past. This is a good one. Free college at state institutions to students and families with income under $80,000. Well, I guess everybody deserves to go to college at somebody else's expense.
It seems like it's a fundamental right.
It does. And of course, when they go to those state institutions, which have been totally captured by the wokesters, they'll be further indoctrinated in the kind of philosophy that's allowed these laws to be passed. So it's like they get a double bonus for passing this law.
Yeah, amazing.
Free lunch and breakfast to all Minnesota students, regardless of family income, free. Well, it's not free. It's at the expense of other people, whether they have kids or not. It takes further responsibility away from the parents, where they're even less responsible for the well-being of their kids because the state is going to provide free lunch and breakfast to them.
It's because it takes a village, Doug. It takes a village.
Takes a village. That's exactly right. Increase spending on K through 12 by 10%. Ban Native American mascots. Okay, so you can't have the Braves or the Indians or the any other Indian kind of names, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, even it's weird they have these protected classes. Okay, so like they get rid of Columbus Day, replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day, and then you ban anything that I know there's some people that might look at the Native American mascots as like making fun of them or racist or whatever, but you got to imagine there must be some middle school in a heavily populated area where that actually has Native Americans there that might call themselves whatever the name of their real tribe is, and that would be banned. You know what I mean? Like eliminating the right to do that is weird.
Exactly. And athletic teams only call themselves things which are respected. They don't call themselves the wusses or the pussies or anything like that. So of course they call themselves the Braves and the Indians or whatever, because they were noble and looked up to. I guess the Trojans no longer exist as a group, so you can still have a group called the Trojans if you wish. But this is just crazy. So you think that the Indians or Native Americans, if you would, I understand that Native Americans prefer to be called Indians, but that's just what I've heard, because Russell Means was a famous wild man Indian, said that he preferred being called an Indian, and he's kind of authoritative on that. But so this is kind of destroying one of the kind of noble things about their culture legally at the same. Everything is upside down and crazy.
Yeah.
So raised fees for hunting, fishing, boating, visiting state parks. Okay, right.
But it's just what I like about that one is, or don't like about it, I guess I should say, is that it's limiting or raising the bar for access to so-called public property, to be able to reuse these public resources. It's more gates, more fences, more rules, more game wardens, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just trying to keep people in their 15-minute cities by pricing them out.
Yeah, so only duly authorized government officials can use these things, actually. How about created a hate speech database? That could mean a number of things, but
I started reading the background of that, but it wasn't really clear. So I'm not really sure.
Well, a few of these things are actually clear, so they can be interpreted on the spot by proper government officials. Ban no-knock warrants. Well, that's one I kind of like.
Support that. Yeah, totally support that.
Yeah. So anyway, all these new laws. So.
Well, and the big thing here to me is that this is what when people are motivated to push through legislation or to make a change, this is what happens. And this is what we see from the left side of the spectrum all the time. And on the right side, as you were saying, it's like, no, just a little slower. And so whatever, the Republicans did and, suspending the debt limit or, getting horse trading a little bit, little doodads, little delays in certain things, it's nothing. And we get caught up in the parade of, the Kabuki Theater, as you said.
Well, this list proves that, was it Mark Twain that said it? I think it was. He said that no man's life, liberty, or property is safe when the Congress is in session. And that certainly goes for these state bodies, state equivalents as well. Because whenever these people get together, they pass more things like this that have to be observed and enforced, which all costs money and makes people's lives more miserable at great expense. It's it's really just quite shocking.
Yeah.
And
Speaking of,
trend is accelerating too.
well, speaking of Mark Twain, he also has a famous line that says lies, damned lies, and statistics. And it just, these stats that are put out by the government and different departments in the government they're just so confusing, because here's one that came out today that talked about, one survey says that the economy added 339,000 jobs. Another survey says that there was a decline of 310,000 jobs. Like, how can they be so far off from each other? What is reality? And I don't know, what's the point in this?
Well, actually, there is no point, because if these numbers were meaningful, instead of a government agency that you have to pay all these cubicle dwellers to put together these numbers, which come to contradictory conclusions. I mean, something like anybody that was interested in this, like the Chamber of Commerce, who are self-funded, could come up with their own numbers. You could believe them or not believe them, but this is actually insane that the government comes up with, based on what? Added 339,000 or declined by 310. Which is it? And based on what? It's meaningless. It's just more clutter for your mind.
Right. It does make it hard. I mean, if you can't even identify the problem, if you can't even agree on what the problem is, there's zero chance of you resolving it. And when the statistics, when it's confusing, is the economy doing well or is it doing poorly? And there's a question about that. Like, it's not even settled whether or not the economy is doing well or poorly. So how can you do it?
All we know is what we see on the TV or read in the papers, which has been written by some reporter who probably doesn't know anything about anything, except he's been told to turn out 500 words on this topic. That's true. So it's now listen, I think the bottom line for all this type of thing is decisions that you should make them based upon what you see and observe and interpret yourself. And you don't need the media to help you. I mean, if you wouldn't know about it unless the media told you about it, well, you know what? If it's really important, some friend will tell me about it and we can discuss it. But I don't need to waste my time reading the article that some talking reporter puts together.
It's a good point. Yeah. And but most of our lives are mediated through screens now. But one of the things we talked about last time, or a couple of times ago maybe, was just that in some ways it does seem like the economy is strangely booming, at least in travel, and at least in where these tourist spots are just overwhelmed with people. And none of that makes any sense to me. I still haven't. I don't get it. Where people where the money is coming for all that.
Well, they have been creating trillions of dollars, which are going someplace. We're not sure exactly where. And people having been locked down for a couple of years probably say, God, this is my last chance to go out and see something different. Maybe that's the reason. But I think it's ephemeral. And the spending is not directed towards new scientific discoveries or new technologies or new, construction or whatever. It's towards consumption.
Right.
Consumption. Restaurants, amusement park rides, driving around pointlessly, looking at sites. And this isn't adding to the net wealth of the country, probably.
Yeah, I've got to show you one more thing before we go about the sites where you mentioned that and consuming. Just real quick, I'd be remiss for not mentioning this, I think, or showing you this here. What do you think of this?
Is that real or is that a Photoshop?
It's real.
Wow. Well, I used to love rainbows. I mean, everybody loves rainbows. I mean, they've always represented good things in the past, but now they don't represent good things anymore. At least I don't think so.
Well, yeah, I guess this is just something they did for Pride Month. It is Pride Month, so I hope you're flying your LGBTQI plus whatever flag high above the Casey estate.
Well, any flag that I do fly is likely to be a black flag, which is the traditional symbol of anarchy. But I don't believe in flags, generally speaking. So I don't need to proudly display whatever my beliefs are.
Right. It actually shows you something's weird about people who do that. Something is weird.
Yeah, trying to tell the world about what's going on inside your head. That's rather narcissistic at best.
Yeah, it is. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug. You said enough things that could get this video demonetized or serve poor in the algorithm. So we probably should wrap it up before it gets too much worse.
We could say, well, we shouldn't. A few things about the Ukraine, which we've covered a number of times in the past, but it seems to me the Ukrainians are getting their asses handed to them, and hundreds of thousands of people have died there, but the Russians are winning, I think, overwhelmingly. And as far as where that's going to go, and who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and what's going to happen next, the next few weeks even could tell us a lot.
There's actually a major exercise that NATO is doing. I had some notes on it. It was like the largest in NATO history. They call it Air Defender. It's got 220 aircraft and 10,000 personnel. They ride along, the Russian border where they're just doing this major exercise. I think it starts on like the 12th of this month. It's like, why do these things? Why be so provocative? I don't understand it.
It's really just asking for trouble. You should not go out and ask for trouble because, people have forgotten. This is just a border war between two shithole countries. And in the last 1,000 years, there have been lots of them where the borders have flowed on the map like the colors are running. And, it's not like the Ukraine is the homeland of freedom. It's a perfectly horrible place. I feel bad for the Ukrainians, but before Lenin stepped on the scene, Ukraine wasn't even a country. Putin said that. Everybody laughed and made fun. It was a region where people spoke Ukrainian, but it wasn't a country.
Yeah, but why do you think that the U.S. is stepping on the gas so much? I mean, given how many hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have been killed in this. I mean, a generation of young men are being lost in Ukraine. Territory is they're not able to gain territory. They keep talking about this spring counteroffensive, which they've been really talking about for many months now, and just keeps getting all the news is anticipating it, but it never comes. I don't know if they even can marshal the forces to do it. But why do you think that they're being so? There's no off-ramp at all. Still, after all this time, there's no effort for peace. It's just about crushing the enemy. It's like a middle school mentality, rather, I don't understand it.
Well, as Stirner said during World War I, war is the health of the state. And every time you have a war, the state grows and it rarely retrenches to where it was before the war. So the kind of people that go into government are pro-war, regardless of what they say.
But isn't it denying maybe we don't obviously have firsthand knowledge of exactly what's happening there, but it seems like they're limiting or eliminating the idea of an off-ramp is going to end up making them look really stupid. The U.S. government and NATO in general that they are taking on, that the Russians have, if they win, it doesn't make them look stupid. They aren't even providing themselves political cover for that.
That's so true. The Russians wind up accomplishing what they wanted to accomplish to start with, which is to say, stop the attack against the Donbass and safeguard the Crimea. That's all they wanted to accomplish to start with. And this thing has gotten out of hand. And it seems like it's getting further out of hand. And it's going to be really embarrassing for the Western powers if the Russians accomplish this. And the Ukrainian government, for what it's worth, which is not much, collapses. And Zelensky, who's now close to a billionaire, it's said, goes into exile in Miami or some other place like that. It's just not going to look good at all. Can they let it hang like that? Or will they have to do something to make themselves right?
That's what I worry about. That's exactly my worry.
Yeah. And beyond that, sure, the Ukraine has no business being in NATO. In fact, NATO has no business existing. When the Soviet Union fell, NATO should have collapsed. It was the end of that. Should have been the end of it. It served no useful purpose after the USSR collapsed. But nobody ever talks about, I haven't seen them talk about it anywhere, that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are all members of NATO, and they're on the Russian border. And now Finland is a member, and it's on the Russian border. So why is Ukraine special with its membership in NATO, which it shouldn't belong to, nor should these other countries? But I'd like that question answered. I'd just like to know.
You mean, why does Russia so much object to Ukraine where it didn't put up a fight over Finland, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting question that I haven't heard a discussion of. But all we know is what we hear on certain news channels. So maybe some people are discussing it, but it doesn't filter down to us plebs.
No, not yet. But they'll tell us what we need to know when we need to know it, though. I can be sure of that.
That's right. This is all like need-to-know basis.
Exactly. All right. Well, we'll leave it there, Doug. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.